Welcome back. So, Health Services Management, BADM 614, and I'm your professor, Jeremy Roberts. And let's go ahead and dive in. So, we're going to talk a little bit about the reading. So, kind of give you a brief overview. Trying to keep this video short for you guys because you guys are busy. Just like I am busy, you guys are working professionals. So, you're doing a day job plus, trying to do a master's degree, which is very impressive, trying to do both at the same time. I did the same thing and I barely survived, but I believe you guys are pretty close to the end of your journey. So you should pat yourself on the back that you made it this far. So we're going to talk about chapter 3. So getting started with project management. Then chapter 4, we're talking about time, and specifically with time scheduling. We're always running out of time, and hopefully if we can master time and space and all that together, we can control time. Probably not going to happen, but at least we can try. And then we're going to talk about our second paper. So the paper is about PERT, Program Evaluation Review Technique. So let's go ahead and talk about chapter 3. So topic 3 was about getting started with the project. What do you need to get a project started? Well, the most essential thing that you should have is a business case. Why do you need to do a project? A lot of times people forget about this. They're just like hit the ground running, but they don't know why they're running. And, it's be good to know why you're running a marathon and know that end goal that you hope to achieve now, know it in the beginning so you can see how much progress you're making. Otherwise, if you're running a marathon, you're just going to be like, how far do I got to run? I'm not sure if you've ever done that where you just go out running with no real destination in mind. You just know sooner or later you're going to turn around and go back. But, we're trying to get to that unique end state. So in the running metaphor I'm using, we're ending at a different location, not where we parked our car, which is going to be kind of a problem. But, we can solve that problem later. So knowing that case study, or not the case study, the business case, why are we doing this? How is it going to meet the strategic goals of the company? How is it going to help us change something so we can achieve those goals better? And, they'll be tied into the vision and the mission of the organization, but we need to know what we're doing. So the sponsor is usually the person who gives us this project. So if you are a project manager, the sponsor might be some executive or a senior manager who says, here you go ahead and start this project. If your company is well established or of a large size, there's probably a project management office that oversees all the projects. And they might have a program management professional or even a portfolio management professional or a very senior, like 30 years doing project management type person running that office. Or they could be some executive who has it as an additional duty and they honestly don't pay much attention. Really depends on your organization. So your sponsor is meant to be there to clear obstacles for you. If you're having problems with, say, talking with a certain department and you've tried everything you can to resolve it on your own, you can talk to the sponsor and the sponsor should be able to eliminate the problem. It might be them just coming down and making a directive saying, this is how this is what's going on, make it happen. And then the other management, the manager of the other department, starts doing what they're supposed to. It also helps to know what kind of authority you have. And that sponsor is the person who's essentially giving it to you in the form of a charter. The charter outlines what you're doing, has some of the business case in it, what you're doing, when the deadline is, what your budget is, who your team is. If your team's already been established, sometimes you have to do that yourself as a project manager. But it outlines a lot of different things. And there's no set in stone definition of what has to be in a charter and what does not go in a charter. You can load that thing up with every conceivable thing, but it's a document that's just to get you started. And it gives you the authority as a project manager. Now, when I say authority, you might have no authority, but you might have an extreme amount of authority. And it can go any sorts of different directions. Maybe you have a lot of authority over people, but you have no authority over the budget, or so on and so forth. Your charter should specify this. That's one thing it should do. That way you can just show the charter to somebody if they're really giving you a hard time and say, hey, see, the CEO of the company has assigned me to this task and you need to help out with getting it done or providing a resource that I need to get it done. So while we have that charter, we're probably going to have a couple stakeholders listed on that charter. These are people or organizations or groups that have some type of interest in this project. A stakeholder can be a medical patient, could be the family of the patient, it could be society or the community. It can be all sorts of different things. It could be the environment. The environment could be a stakeholder, although they're not going to speak up or say anything. But the stakeholders are anybody who has, for lack of better words, a dog in the fight. If you're building a new hospital and it's going to go where a forest was, you might have an environmental group that wants to keep the forest there or a minimal impact to that forest. Or you might have some community organization that likes to go around wandering in the forest because there's a unauthorized path or not an established path, but it's just kind of a commonly known walking path out there. So you might have these things. And one way to do, like, let's say that walking path, maybe you incorporate a walking path into the grounds of the new hospital. That way, yes, you took away a path, but you also provided one. And maybe it's safer because it's lit and all these other things. There's a lot of things you can do to make stakeholders happy and make them mad. So the best thing you want from a stakeholder is those that support what you're doing. The ones who are actively against you, while they're stakeholders, they may have some authority or they may not. It really depends. I mean, an environmental group, the worst thing they can do is probably file a lawsuit and slow down what's going to happen. But the hospital's still probably going to be built because whoever's building the hospital probably has a lot more money than that environmental group. And, money talks when it comes to those kind of things in our court system, unfortunately. But that's stakeholders. You can involve them in some of the things, and sometimes you don't involve them. You communicate with them. It might be just a written communication, such as like a press release, or it can be actually bringing them and having them sit down at the table where they ask you questions and it's a conversation. So it can go a lot of different ways. The next thing that was in that chapter was the work breakdown structure. So this is where we take the larger tasks and break it down into smaller ones. So we might have establishment of a heliport at the hospital. That was one of the examples I believe was in chapters 1 and 2. So if you're establishing a heliport, a helicopter landing site, you probably need to coordinate with, let's say, maybe the local airport, the FAA. You might have to talk with the city for maybe there's some type of code, building code that goes into that. All these different things. Maybe you need to find out what kind of helicopter is coming to the hospital. Or maybe that's part of your job is to pick the kind of helicopter. Well, different helicopters need different things. If you're going to put a military CH-53 helicopter, the one with 2 props on the top, those things are extremely heavy. But then again, if you have something like they used in Vietnam, it was basically what looked like what we have today is a sightseeing helicopter that you can pay like $20 and it'll fly you around. Those things are pretty light. So putting a heliport on top of a building with that a heavy helicopter or a light helicopter is going to make a difference. Or if you put the landing pad on the ground, well, where on the ground? And is it safe for it to take off and land depending on where the building is, where the wind comes from? So many different things to consider. And all these things, these little things can be put into the work breakdown structure. For example, if you're going to use concrete, well, the part of the thing would be reaching out to a concrete provider or several, getting some bids, selecting one, then having them do the work, having it inspected possibly. All these little steps go into just pouring a concrete pad on the ground, especially if it's going to be for something like a helicopter. So what we're doing is just taking the big activities and breaking them down, just like a paper. You probably separated some of the work out and gave it to different people. That's my guess. That's how my other students do it. They take it a big part and break it into little parts. That's all we're doing here. And we'll talk a little bit more about the work breakdown structure in the time. So chapter 4. So creeping. There's several types of creep that our book identified, and they all happen. It's just how much they happen and how we can control them. One of the biggest ones that they talk about in project management is scope creep, where the activities of what you're doing for your project, the scope of that, only goes so far. But as the project goes on, it expands and expands and expands, which is unintentional. And also the schedule. The schedule, let's say you had a hard deadline of January 30th. Well, now the schedule's been pushed to February 14th, February 28th, March 15th. These kind of things, that's a schedule creep. The schedule is getting longer, and it's probably because some of your activities under the work breakdown structure are taking longer than you estimated. So in time, we can talk about estimation of these activities, but there's no perfect way to do project management. There's just best practices. So that's chapter 3 in a nutshell. And chapter 4, we're talking about estimation of time, or how much time are we going to put into an activity. So we can do PERT, but there's some other ones we can do. There's a 3-point estimation. There's a 6-point estimation. 6-point estimation is my preference. That's where we take the optimistic estimate. Let's say it's going to take 1 day, is the optimistic. The most likely is going to take 2 days. And then the pessimistic estimate is going to take 3 days. Well, you just take the optimistic times 1, the most likely times 4, and then the pessimistic times 1. And then you figure that out and you divide that answer by 6. And that's your estimate. That's a 6-point estimation. Real simple to do. It's because that most likely is most likely going to happen. So it puts more weight it puts 2/3 of the weight onto that number. But it's still accounting for the optimistic and the pessimistic estimates. So, and there's a couple other estimation methods that I believe our book covered. And there's more that our book doesn't cover. So it really comes down to your industry. Now, you guys are in healthcare, so maybe healthcare uses something that I'm not aware of. I tried looking, I couldn't find anything in a quick Google search, but it's out there. I'm sure it is. Network diagram. This is something our book kind of are covered pretty well. We have the early start, the late start, the early finish, the late finish, and we have, it looks like boxes with lines drawn to them. Well, we can do what's called a critical path method to find out what's the latest something can start, what's the earliest something can start. And the critical path means like those activities cannot change. They must happen when they're scheduled. Where other ones, we might be able to shift forward or backwards. We might be able to shift one, maybe start it early, and others might be able to shift backwards and start later, some activities. So network diagrams, those can take me like 3 hours to describe. But, I'm trying not to go long. I'm already 15 minutes into this video. And, if you guys want a more detailed explanation of network diagrams, let me know. Send me an email. Schedule control. So you guys, I mentioned the creep earlier. Well, one thing that happens is the schedule gets bumped because things get added. So if they say, okay, we're going to build that helicopter pad, but now we want to add this extra feature. Maybe make it one of those evil villain style where it just lowers on the ground and the ground covers it up. Kind of like a garage underneath the ground. That works. But if they're going to add that kind of work to you, they need to give you the time to do it, because that's not something that's going to happen without extending your schedule. You're going to need the budget to do that, and you're going to need your scope to be adjusted to cover that. But usually they want more, but they don't give you any more time or money to do this. That's just kind of how it happens in project management. You just have to be able to say no, or can we talk about this? And then you can kind of softly say no when it comes to extra things. We call it kind of gold plating when we choose to add stuff to it. But if somebody adds stuff to it, usually we want to do something called change management, because we're changing the scope, or we're changing the schedule, or we're changing, the budget for it. So we have to document why we're doing it and what we're expected to do. And usually that goes through a review process. It might go through a project management office and then come back down saying approved or disapproved. But, that's something we have to keep out for. But since we're talking about time, it's very easy for activities when we're estimating in the beginning that we've estimated too little. It's a very common thing. Unless we've done that type of activity before, then we have a good idea of what it's going to take. But there's so many unique things, because a project is not a routine thing, right? It's a project is a unique endeavor that has a defined start and end date. It's not an operation. So with that, I can tell you that it's going to take me 8 hours to run a marathon. But when I actually get out there and do it, I might stop halfway through and say, forget this. It really depends. So, some of you might do a marathon in 4 hours. I don't know. That's, hey, good for you if that's what you can do. But estimating, it's difficult to nail that down because our schedule depends on those estimations. When we're doing the estimation, yes, we can do it. We can do internet. We can Google things and see how long things should take. So that's where the most likely on that 6-point estimation. But have somebody who may be more experienced. Like if you talk to somebody, just kind of moving on with that helicopter landing pad, that heliport, you might want to talk to another hospital that has done one recently and say, hey, how long did it take you to do that? And they may say, oh, that took us 2 years because of the FAA approval process, or, local zoning, or, whatever, things like that. Maybe there was an environmental study that needed to be done, and you didn't think about an environmental study. So you can add that because you've talked to somebody else. I highly encourage you to talk to others, and just see what you might have missed. Or maybe there's some things you've listed that really don't need to be there. You can do this on the work breakdown structure too. So I forgot to mention, on the work breakdown structure, you don't want to go so deep where you're making a lot of little activities. You want to pick a breakdown of maybe something that will take 4 hours or 8 hours to do. Don't go anything lower than that. Don't go down into the single hour or the 2 hours type thing. That's just getting too detailed. And it's not necessary. But depending on your company, it might be necessary. I don't encourage it because your work breakdown structure will be extremely complex and massive. So it's tough when you get that deep into it. So your schedule control really comes down to your estimation. I'm hoping you kind of got that gist as I was going through. One thing that we can do is called crashing. Now, crashing is when, well, I'll just give an example. Let's say we're 2 weeks behind on a part of the project, and we're told that we have to finish our project on time, but we're actually 2 weeks behind. We might be able to do something called crashing, where we just crash a whole lot of resources at something, and people, equipment, everything that we need, including the budget, because the budget's going to hurt after this. And you just get so many people on it. You make so much progress in however long your period of time is. Let's say it's a week and you're crashing for a week. You might realize that you've crashed and now you're ahead of schedule instead of behind schedule. Crashing is not really the way to do it because a lot of things can go wrong, especially when you get a lot of people who are not part of the project into the project to do for a short period of time. They don't know how things go. You might be doing some documentation while you're doing this so others know what was happening and you can move on from there. In case, let's say, something goes wrong, others can see the documentation and possibly figure out what to fix, or many other things. But crashing or fast tracking really can get you back up to speed, but you got to be prepared for it. And it's not the crashing is not, pulling a double or, coming in on Saturday. That's not really crashing. Crashing is when you bring those additional resources in. So yeah, that is essentially topic 4. And I'm kind of glad that time was brought in early in this class, because it's so essential. Everybody is so focused on time and the budget that it often gets overlooked on how to follow it, how to maintain your schedule. And I'm sure if you think about some of the things that you have to do, you might have said, oh yeah, I'll get to that tomorrow. And that was 3 weeks ago. Well, your schedule kind of probably took a left turn. Might have been family things, might have been someone called you and you went out. I mean, it could have been work. I mean, a lot of things could have distracted you from completing what you said, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. I'm the same way. I have the same list, that the honey-do list that I've been meaning to do. There's a couple of things I've been meaning to fix, but I'm like, okay, I'll do it this Saturday. And then Saturday comes and, well, it doesn't happen because other things took higher priority. Now, yes, I could technically crash it by hiring a handyman or two to take care of all these little things. But, it's handymen are not cheap. So, and then I'd have to kind of supervise them. And then we have this, this variant of the COVID virus. So having unknown people come into the house is, not ideal at this time. I hope you guys can sympathize or, understand where I'm going with that. But yeah, I mean, we do all this in our personal lives. It's just to what extent. Okay. Paper number 2. So what is PERT and how can it be effectively applied to healthcare? Now, like I said, you guys probably do most of this while you're at work. So it's program evaluation review technique. So project management planning tool used to calculate the amount of time it will take to realistically finish a project. So to realistically finish a project. It's not the, blue skies, everybody's having a great day and, Bambi is jumping across the lawn. It's what's realistically. If it's going to be ugly, it's going to be ugly. If it's, looks nice, it looks nice. It's what it realistically needs to be. So look into this technique. I'm not looking for you guys to do any math, but if you guys want to talk about math, that's fine. But, that's the paper. Like use APA version 7 for any references and inline citations. I'm not picky about the paper format beyond that. I just would like to, know where you're getting your references. And, yeah, shoot me an email if you guys have any questions on this. Um, when you complete this paper, submit it on eCampus to the assignment. It should be paper 2 under the, I want to say it's the papers tab. I don't recall what I called it, but I believe it's probably under week 3. There should be an assignments link, I believe, if I set that up the way I intended to. But if not, send it to me by email. I don't like email because then I don't have anything in the system to grade. And that makes things a little bit more difficult in case of like a grade challenge. I don't have a date and time stamped thing in eCampus. I just have an email. And emails can get accidentally deleted, which I don't do. I actually file away every email. But things happen. eCampus is backed up every week, and it's pretty reliable. I can just call ITS and figure out what's going on. But yeah, I believe I put the requirement of 5 pages. It should be pretty easy to do if you want to throw some examples of how you would apply PERT instead of it just being a dry paper about what is PERT. But how can you apply it? So it should be easy. Not looking for a dissertation level writing or a master's thesis. I'm looking for the content and knowing that you guys understand it. So yeah, that's it. I've been talking for way too long, in my opinion. And if you guys have any questions, shoot me an email. I'll be more than happy to answer it. I generally reply, at least recently, to emails within 24 hours, sometimes sooner. Yeah, I look forward to another great week, and I look forward to reading your paper number 1 and your discussions. And yeah, I hope you guys have a good week, and that the snow that came down today is not too bad. It didn't look so bad when I looked out the window. But hope you guys all stay safe. If you have any questions, like, oh, wow, I should stop probably saying that, shouldn't I? All right, well, I'm just going to say good night.